Welcome to a new episode of Mind Your Mind. Here I am again with a fantastic conversation ahead. I have today the pleasure to be with Andy Cross. He's a registered social worker and caseworker in the University of Cumbria's mental health and wellbeing team. He is co-founder of ClimbWell, which seeks to combine psychotherapy and climbing. So we will be talking about different angles of what you are doing, Andy. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
The moment that I read an article about the Recharge event and the people that have been there and the activities that were done there, I was quite curious and interested in having this conversation with you. So thank you for actually being here. Why don't we start and you tell us a little bit what it is ClimbWell?
So ClimbWell is a company that we've recently founded, myself and a psychotherapist who's also a climbing instructor. And the main premise is kind of come out of the back of a lot of the work that I've been doing at the university. And the idea is that we combine climbing, bouldering, which is a kind of discipline of climbing. We combine that with kind of psychology-informed approaches, psychological informed approaches that I use in my kind of everyday kind of clinical setting. And the idea is we combine the two. And we've designed a course. We are kind of looking to get this out in the local community in the same way that we've kind of been delivering it at the university. So yeah, it's a new project that we're getting off the ground at the moment.
Fantastic. One question that I always ask, where is your local community?
So our local community is Carlisle. So we're blessed enough to be in Cumbria, kind of the home of climbing, really, modern day climbing. So we're really fortunate in that there's some beautiful spots to climb.
A beautiful part of the UK, actually. So can you tell me a little bit more about the work that you have been doing in the university? Because it's my impression that everything starts there, no? With that pilot study that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh God, I'm going back maybe 3.5, 4 years now. I was before that working in the NHS, and I'd started working as a caseworker within Student Services mental health team. So we work with students who are struggling with their mental health. And I came across a paper from Katrina Luttenberg, which looked at the use of bouldering and psychotherapy. And I came across the paper, I was like, oh my days, we need to do this. So I took the paper along to my boss and I was like, can we please do this? And he basically turned around and says, I'll tell you what, if you get a bit more evidence together, see what the evidence base is with it and make a proposal, what you want to do, design a program, and we'll consider running a pilot study. And we've just completed our 4th cohort. So our yearly cohorts, we run 2 groups a year. So yeah, we're kind of quite a way down the road now. It all came about as a result of that one paper that I just stumbled across, really.
And having the bold idea as well of making it happen.
Yeah.
No, that's always difficult sometimes to find the space to. We may come with ideas, but it's sometimes difficult.
Yeah,
I think I'm really lucky to actually make it happen.
Yeah, I think I'm really lucky in that we're in a university, so university settings tend to lend themselves to being quite dynamic. And at the University of Cumbria, I'm really lucky that the team have always been really forward thinking in kind of how we support. We're a small university, so a lot of the time we have to be quite creative in our approaches, which lends itself well to the way in which we work with our students. And I think that kind of produces some really good work on our part. And yeah, really lucky to be where I am in terms of having an environment that promotes that creativity, which was very different to when I worked in the NHS before, which was typically, very quite structured. We do it this way. It's got to be nice, concordant. Whereas the university lends itself to being quite a dynamic field where actually that sounds like a brilliant idea. Let's What's the evidence behind it? You
Mm.
know, what can we do to support you with this idea? And yeah, I've been really lucky in that the university have always kind of been that way in the group work that we deliver.
That's fantastic, and such an important environment to be able to be creative. I have two questions. The pressing one is bouldering. I don't understand the difference between bouldering and climbing. Do you want to explain that a little bit
Yeah,
for those that
yeah,
are in a similar place like me?
absolutely. So bouldering is, I suppose, to really understand bouldering, you have to go back kind of 50 odd years when bouldering was a way of training for climbing. It was all low level on small boulders on kind of where you could fall off and not hurt yourself. And it started as a way of kind of developing skills that you might use when you're up a mountainside. But over time, it's developed into a whole separate discipline of climbing. So where you might find big boulders on hillsides or outcrops or, you know, anything like that, where you're able to climb to the top and you might have a bouldering mat underneath, which is a kind of mat that you carry on your back, like a little crash pad, I suppose. So it's small enough where you might be able to jump off the top or fall off without really hurting yourself. And this is developed into a whole separate discipline to kind of your traditional climbing that most people think of. And there's lots of climbers that will only boulder. Now, the beauty of bouldering is it's accessible because really all you need is a pair of rock boots
Yes, and
and a
so you
chalk
don't
bag.
need harnesses or
No,
cords, any of that.
absolutely. And you don't need to know all the skills that you need for
Mm-hmm.
traditional climbing. So there's no ropes, you know, you
Yes.
don't have to buy all this expensive equipment. All you need is a pair of rock boots, really. And it's accessible. You know, bouldering walls are kind of climbing walls that are just kind of single story. You know, they may be a couple of meters high and that's it. So there's no real kind of,
Mm.
you've not got that long period of training in order to understand the skills of climbing. So it's
I
really
understand.
accessible and we're all designed to climb. You know, everybody's climbed at some point in their life as a kid. You
Yes.
know, it's a really natural thing for us to do. And that's the beauty of bouldering. It's completely natural for us to do it. We just tell ourselves that we're too grown up to do it now.
Yes, or too scared, or too
Yeah.
stiff, or not strong enough, or
Yeah.
yes, at least those are the things that I tell myself if I ever even think about what we are talking about. So, what about the study? What were the findings of the study?
So the main findings of the study were that our so we were collecting data using a generalized anxiety disorder scale, so a GAD-7, PHQ-9 outcome measures,
Yeah.
so physical
Mm-hmm.
health measures, as well as the Warwick Edinburgh Wellbeing for mental, you know, kind of mental health outcome measures as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we were taking these measures, and the main findings across the board were anxiety levels reduced.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And one of the key things that we found was their sense of ability, their sense of kind of their role kind of came out of the mental health and well-being scale. That also increased, which we were surprised by. Generally, depression levels reduced across the cohort as well. So
Uh-huh.
if we think about it generally, so GAD-7, PHQ-9, we'd expect a downward trend across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what we got with all cohorts. And then the Warwick Edinburgh Wellbeing Scale, you'd expect their kind of outcomes to increase, which is
Okay.
exactly what
Mm-hmm.
we got.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and that's been across the board in all cohorts.
And what is the structure of it was a program that you were implementing
Yeah,
in the
so
cohorts?
it
Can you tell us a
started
little bit
off,
about that?
yeah, so it started off as a 7 week course. Now, I think the difficulty with our course is while we're collecting all this data, it does have to be taken with not necessarily a pinch of salt, but it's been a really organic process of development.
Yeah.
So it
Uh-huh.
has changed with each cohort that we've
Mm-hmm.
done. And we're kind of at a place where we're really comfortable now, but that's taken a few years. We joke it's been the longest pilot study in history, because each year we keep adapting it, because we keep kind of seeing areas where we can improve it. But it started off as a 7-week program, and each session is divided into 2 parts. So the first part is what we call the psychoeducation. So we'll all come to a room and we'll explore a mental health skill or a mental health piece of theory. And that is kind of delivered over about an hour and a half. So we're all in a room, we unpack it, we relate to it, we kind of explore it, what it is, what's the function of it, how it affects us, what a bit of the theory is, nothing too much in detail, but kind of giving a basic overview of each theme each week. And then what we then do is, after we've done that, we'll get changed into our rock boots and we go out on the bouldering wall. After a bit of a warm-up, we'll then apply that theory that we've learned to some activities on the climbing wall.
I see. Okay.
And so what we're finding is that, or the aim of it, should I say, is that the activities on the climbing wall reinforce the learning that we've done in the psychoeducation. And that's a really key mechanism within our course, and all the feedback. So part of the feedback that we get from our students is a question around, do you feel that the psychoeducation alone would be enough to kind of help you? And all the feedback is no. Because psychoeducation is a complex thing. It's, psychoeducation is quite abstract some of the times. And, psychoeducation absolutely has its place and has its use. But what I found is a lot of the time we're talking about quite complex ideas and theories with people that are in a lot of distress. And so maybe not in the best place to kind of have that kind of awareness, or that kind of, they're not in their best place. So that abstract kind of theory doesn't typically land very well.
Exactly. And it's difficult to absorb information
Absolutely.
sometimes when you are not well, when you are under pressure, when you're feeling particularly stressed. It's just difficult to absorb new information, right?
Absolutely.
It happens to all of us. It's expected.
When we're under that level of stress, like you say, it's harder to absorb that information. So what we're finding is or what the feedback's told us is that by then unpacking it on a climbing wall, reinforcing the learning. So we might, for example, one of the weeks we talk about fear. So we use a lot of compassion-focused therapy in our work.
Okay.
So we talk about a drive system and a threat system and a soothe system. And this works really well with climbing. So we talk about the drive system and what motivates us to climb, when we feel really good about completing a boulder problem, when we talk about goal orientation, all drive system led, that dopamine fix when we get to the top of the climb, we feel great because we worked it for weeks and weeks and weeks and we finally succeed. Very much drive orientated. Or soothe orientation. So when we're feeling nervous, or when we buy into a narrative around, I can't do it, particularly when we're at the top end of our ability, how do we access that soothe system in order to manage that threat-based response, whether it's fear, whether it's self-criticism, whether it's a poor narrative about our ability, whether it's the environment that we're in when we're climbing with people that are much better than us, and we feel inferior in some way. All of these things can affect the way in which we perform as climbing. Now, the beauty is that we're constantly linking it back to our everyday life. So while we hold that in mind, actually, it's really applicable to our everyday life. We buy into narratives. We don't do things. We self-limit because of the narratives that we buy into.
The things that we tell ourselves that we can and cannot do, or how good we may be.
The
I heard comparison on what you were saying as well.
Social comparison theory is one of the theories that we look into one of the weeks. And so there's all these threat-based responses to the situations that we're in can affect the way that we feel about ourselves. And the beauty of bouldering is it kind of, in a really safe environment, kind of puts us in that place
Mm.
in a really safe context.
Mm.
So it's really contained, but we can have that basic awareness of what it actually feels like in that moment, but in a really safe context. And so it's more, I suppose it creates an environment where it's more applicable, it's more real. It's,
Yes.
you know,
It's physical as well.
absolutely.
You can
It,
experience it through
yeah,
your body and put it,
absolutely.
the theory to put into practice, but through you,
Yeah,
no?
that embodied, reality in
Exactly,
the moment.
exactly. Uh-huh.
And that's what all the feedback has given us, is that actually, I don't think I would have got it as well if I'd have just done the psychoeducation. And so that's the beauty of our course, this course that we've been delivering. We got the theory first, the psychoeducation, and then we're applying it to the wall. And then while we're on the wall, what we're doing is we're kind of coming back as a group, exploring it. So we might do an exercise, right, go off and do this exercise, and then we'll come back as a group and discuss it. And during those discussions, what we're finding is people open up really, really quickly.
Uh-huh.
And people were tending to kind of have these really rich discussions about, oh my gosh, yeah, I I had a moment where I could have used this the other day or the other week, or I've got something coming up and I think that this might be really useful. So it's this constant kind of, I like to think of it as a kind of a triangle. We've got the
Mm-hmm.
psychoeducation, the work on the wall, but it's that constant relating it to our everyday life. And
Yes.
so we're bringing all those bits together. And the group, the program that we've been running, like I said before, is kind of evolved, and we've got it now to a point where we're running it. We tried running it as a solid week, condensed week.
Mm-hmm.
That was shattering.
I
We won't be
bet.
doing that again. That was really tiring for us, for the
For them as well,
participants.
for the
Yeah, they
participants. You
were
don't have a space
absolutely.
to breathe
Yeah.
in between,
And we
right?
think that the outcomes weren't as strong for that because there wasn't the time to go and digest the theory. And so
Yes.
we went back to that weekly model once a week, but we have shortened it to a 5 week model now. And we're kind of in a
Uh-huh.
place where we're really comfortable in in kind of what we're delivering. It's not too long because also we're dealing with the academic kind of responsibilities of students as well.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
7 weeks is a long time to commit in a university. That's nearly a semester, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's a big commitment for students. So we kind of feel that 5 weeks is long enough, but also
Uh-huh.
short enough for students to come and commit to it. So yeah, and I'm sure it'll evolve as we carry on.
Absolutely, and probably different cohorts and different groups or different students from particular areas may have,
Mm,
different needs as well.
uh,
Some of that is part of the process. And one of the things that I want to highlight as well on all what you're saying, although you're taking it as a joke that is the longest pilot, such a good thing
yeah.
because in the end, that's what we need, not to perfect. And I think that also gives the
Mm.
message to those that are listening and thinking and considering pilots or considering a new
Oh yeah,
idea, that is important. Give yourself the time
yeah.
to develop your idea because when we have a project, we start it in a certain way and we not always
Mm,
have it, let's say, right between
yeah,
brackets at first.
yeah.
And that repetition also it clearly has been giving you a very valuable information to develop it and make it work
Mm,
for the group of people that you're working with.
absolutely. Yeah. There have been moments where I'm like, this isn't working. Why is it not working?
Mm,
We had one cohort where we
yes.
had two
Uh-huh.
people,
Uh-huh.
and it turns out that we were delivering at a time when there was lots of placements. So,
Okay.
we're a multi-campus university, and we were delivering it at one of the campuses, and we were like, why is nobody referring? We just had a full cohort that year in a different campus. Why isn't? And then we realized, right, okay, yeah, they're all on placement. You know?
They're
So
busy
it's
somewhere
yeah.
else. Yes.
So it's this constant kind of trying to improve it, and sometimes we hit a bit of a brick wall, and we're like, right, okay, what's that about? So that
Mm.
idea of success and failure, is a
Yes.
real, I suppose, even with myself,
Mm-hmm.
that it's a real personal journey delivering a new project, and yeah, it's I suppose there's a lot for me to take away about myself in my own growth in delivering a part, kind of a new and quite unique project like this.
I never climb, but I do. I may go up stairs when I have
Mm,
to go to the roof of the house, or
yeah, yeah.
things like that. Very difficult for me to do that. It's like
Mm,
I can think about that moment in which you are about to make the move of your hand or the
yeah.
movement of your feet,
Mm,
instead of to just go up and get the strength and the confidence
yeah.
to actually do it, because I really feel that my legs are completely like jelly,
Yeah, yeah.
and what you're saying is making me think about, those steps that we
Mm,
do or not,
yeah, yeah.
and how that is also portrayed on the wall. And
Yeah.
also I'm thinking about how that process then translates into well-being
Absolutely.
somehow.
And bouldering is full of metaphors like this. And this was kind of the
Uh-huh.
I remember sitting there thinking, oh, this has got legs. Sitting there kind of mulling it over whether or not I should go to Dave, who was the manager of the team at the time. And I was like, there is loads of metaphors in bouldering.
Uh-huh.
There's a really famous kind of phrase in climbing. If you're not falling off, then you're not climbing hard enough. Failure is an intrinsic part of climbing,
Uh-huh.
and how
Uh-huh.
we manage failure effectively is a really big part of climbing. And I remember, when I was young, it was all about how hard I'm climbing. And that
Uh-huh.
real kind of self-critic came out a lot of the time. And if I wasn't performing well, then it kind of reflected that I wasn't a great climber. And, I'm in a much kind of wiser position nowadays as that was 20 odd years ago.
Uh-huh.
I can reflect back on that and
For
go,
sure you
oh,
may have
yeah,
you should have
God,
learned something
yeah.
in those years.
I'm a very different person now. But
Uh-huh.
there's I see it a lot in other climbers. So there are these real kind of lessons that we take from
Yes.
climbing, that actually fear is intrinsic and it's natural, failure is intrinsic and it's natural. And how do we manage that?
Mm,
And
mm,
I remember thinking, even the journey aspect of getting from point A to point B is a big metaphor for life. Whether it's these problems that we just have to work out. I know where I want to get to, but how do I link it all together? And
what will
those
be that first step to get there?
absolutely.
Mm,
And a lot of the time, that first move can be the hardest move, or the hardest move might be the
yes.
last move, and this is a great metaphor for personal journeys. So there's loads of metaphors within climbing and bouldering in itself around just living.
Mm, 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 mm. And how do we apply that to our own life?
Mm.
Is this something that you are doing with adults as well?
Yeah,
People
so
that
it's
are
all
out of
adults.
university.
Oh,
I
so
know that the students are adults, but I mean people out of university
yeah, yeah.
world, let's say. There are not students at uni. Is this something that, I'm thinking about people that are at work
Yeah,
at the moment.
yeah, yeah.
That there's so many frontline workers that are listening and that are
Absolutely.
probably exploring options of what
Mm.
else they could explore to get to know
Yeah,
themselves better and so on. Do you think is this something that they could try?
absolutely. And
Mm,
I mean, this is kind of where ClimbWell was born, was
hmm.
actually getting it out in the community, because this is quite big in the continent in Europe. And
Uh-huh.
in America and in Canada, this idea of combining psychotherapy uh, with climbing, because it creates this really rich environment. And we
Mm.
all, I think that there's something to be said around getting out of the therapy room and actually sat in a room in front of a client isn't
Mm-hmm.
for everybody. You
Yes,
know, and we can
absolutely.
see this with social prescribing movement within the
Mm-hmm.
UK at the moment
Yes.
and the
Mm-hmm.
benefits that that creates.
Mm.
And there's some great work going on around the country at the moment where therapists are realizing actually the link between not only the somatic link with mental health, you know, the embodied link of the benefits of kind of getting out, doing something physical, but also the idea of linking the two.
Mm. Mm.
You know, that physical aspect of doing something, that kind of skill-based acquisition where you can concentrate on whatever it is you're doing in front of you, whether it's sitting around a fire or whittling a spoon or doing some green activity like horticultural work, or, you know, something where we've got an activity
Mm-hmm.
that we can focus on enables us to have discussions. There's something freeing about it. And that's something I really didn't take into consideration, but really saw within our group with the
Yes. Uh-huh.
students.
With the
It was
students,
that,
yes.
you know, it didn't take long for people to start opening up. And I was really shocked. Like, kind of week 2, week 3, the group as a whole are talking about really deep stuff, you know, and
Mm.
that not shocked me, but I was surprised by,
Yes.
you know. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, actually, there's something about doing and
Yes.
psychotherapy, and combining that with psychotherapy enables us to kind of create that space to talk more and talk more openly. And I
Mm.
suppose that's why walk and talks are so popular.
It's becoming so
So,
popular,
yeah,
yes.
there's a real sense of doing and talking. And so that's why we kind of set up ClimbWell. Now we're
Mm.
just delivering our first project at the moment, and that's working with refugees and asylum seekers. So we've got
Mm-hmm.
a pot of money to deliver a 3-month project. Once we've got that out of the way, we're looking for more funding to deliver kind of a 5-year course, kind of not a 5-year course, but a 5 years worth of funding,
Mm-hmm.
so that
Uh-huh.
we can deliver 2 days a week for 5 years. And looking at kind of working with, my passion is, I'm a registered social worker, so my passion is really
Yes.
working with disadvantaged communities.
Uh-huh.
So whether it's substance misuse, chronic mental health, chronic physical health, whether it's the refugee and asylum seeking community, LGBT community, you know, so all these communities where there tends to typically be quite a significant need,
Yes.
but actually, when we unpick it, don't get a lot of support, you know,
Yes.
uh, and a lot of the time can be a real barrier in accessing support. And so that's where my passion is. So we're looking to kind of target these key areas, and whether that's kind of one-to-one work, group work, uh, and then on top of that, what we'd like to do is to deliver the more kind of private, what you'd see as private practice. So that then feeds
Yes.
into funding, because it's a
Absolutely.
community interest company that we've set up. So anything that we're kind of hoping to make within a private practice, so it might be somebody says, actually, I'd like to really do some climbing psychotherapy.
Yes.
So one-to-one, let's go out, let's climb, whether it's outside, inside, on a climbing wall, on a bouldering wall, whatever it may be. And that then feeds into funding streams for the group work.
Well, that sounds fantastic. So good luck with that, because it
Yeah,
really, it sounds like, I mean, this is the first time that I hear the connection of them too, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And that's why I felt it was so important to have this conversation so people can start to understand as
Mm,
well. And it's something about that connection, as we are saying, with your body. What you were saying about the beings, when we are sitting in a therapeutic room, we are
mm.
in our heads.
Yeah, absolutely.
and not so much in our bodies.
Yeah, yeah.
Although there are many techniques that can
Mm.
help to get connected with your body. But when we have experience, and I'm thinking as well about the potential of secondary trauma
Yeah.
for frontline workers, for people that are listening, the secondhand impact
Mm.
of listening traumatic experiences or working in chronic sort of levels of stress when
Yeah, yeah.
stress is chronic, and how that can lead as well to burnout and so many other
Absolutely.
symptoms, physical symptoms as well. And we
Mm.
know that physical movement, any kind of movement, is good
Mm.
for you,
Yeah.
right? But the beauty, what I really like from what you're explaining, is how this will take us into doing something,
Mm.
but as a whole,
Yeah.
not just from thinking and
Mm.
reflecting, but combining the two,
Yeah.
doing physically and reflecting at the same
Oh,
time.
yeah.
So that wholesome kind of activity that I would assume as well, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the word that comes to mind is really being in connection with your body. When you
Mm.
are in chronic stress, you
Mm.
tend to disconnect.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That
when you
somatic disconnection.
exactly, the
Yeah, yeah.
somatic disconnection, right? And then you connect.
Mm.
So that is also might be considered meditative. What can you tell us about that?
So
Is
there's
there
a
any sense in what I'm saying?
no, no,
I'm
there is actually.
imagining.
Yeah, yeah. So that kind of somatic response, we do a whole session on
Okay.
on kind of kind of that somatic reconnection, because
Hmm.
we all know that the somatic response and the evidence is becoming more and more profound. I'd say over the last 5 to 10 years, there's a lot. We all knew it as
Yes.
therapists,
Yes.
but the evidence base is really coming out
Mm.
now.
Uh-huh.
And there's a really interesting bit of research. I can't remember the name of it now, but there was an interesting bit of research I read recently around psychologists and how they involve exercise in their
Uh-huh.
practice, and how
Yes.
nervous psychologists are around involving exercise into their practice.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
yet the evidence base to show the need for that reconnection of the body and the mind and that embodied experience, we all know is needed. And the
Yes.
beauty of climbing, and we do, like I say, we do this whole session on that somatic response, even
Uh-huh.
to the
Hmm.
narratives that we buy into. So we talk
Uh-huh.
about the way that we hold our body. So one of the key things in our course is constantly linking back to previous work that we've done on the course. So this somatic
Yes. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
kind of session talks about the idea of how we compassionately hold our body. So do we hold our body in a threat-based response? So when
Hmm.
we're fed up and we're sat on the bouldering mat and we're looking up and saying, oh God, I just cannot get this,
Uh-huh.
and now we're slumping forward and we're really fed up. Actually, before we go on the route, can we have a more compassionate posture? How are we holding ourselves? How are we breathing? What
Mm.
narratives are we buying into? So suddenly we're
Mm.
connecting the mind and the body even before we get on the route. And we talk about this idea of how that affects our ability. So one of the exercises that we do is we get them to kind of hold this just really kind of threat-based response before, just hold
Hmm.
it for a couple of minutes, do a boulder problem. How does it feel? Did it feel difficult? Did it feel hard? Did it feel easy?
Hmm.
And then we get them to do a similar grade, but holding a compassionate posture. So sit up straight, notice our breathing, doing a bit of belly breath work before,
Yeah.
and buying into a more positive, noticing kind of those more negative narratives and allowing space for them, and allowing to refocus on your breath. And actually, what we tend to find is most people find the route much easier. So that's even
Yes.
before we get onto it. So it's this
Uh-huh.
constant kind of connection between our body and our mind is integral to climbing. And this kind of came over to the UK climbing scene from America. That kind
Uh-huh.
of mindful kind of approach
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
climbing
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was coming over from America, I'd say in the early 2000s. And we had a
I see.
few
Uh-huh.
key climbers, American climbers coming over, and it was revolutionary, you know, and it kind of really changed the climbing scene over here, uh, and bringing in that more psychological aspect, the more
Uh-huh.
mindful aspect.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Uh, and there's a really interesting bit of research around bouldering and mindfulness and how bouldering creates this unique environment to
Uh-huh.
access a more mindful state. And there's very few activities
Mm,
that do that,
mm,
because
mm.
when we think
Yes.
about bouldering, when we're bouldering at our kind of top end, and it doesn't matter what grade or what ability you've got, because it's subjective. What's difficult to you is difficult to you. It doesn't matter how everybody else perceives it.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's the beauty here, is that we
Yes.
can
It's very
access this
personal. Yes.
really personal, but we can access that mindful state really quickly. How
Yes.
am I holding my body? What is my breathing doing? Am I focusing? Where am I focusing on 3 or 4 holds? Am I worried about the hardest move, which is in 3 or 4 holds time? Or am I just focusing on one move at a time?
Mm, mm,
When we
mm,
think
mm,
about mindfulness, just being in the present moment,
mm.
in order to climb effectively, we've got to access that mindful state. And
Yes.
when we climb a boulder problem that we've worked for weeks,
Yes.
everything just clicks. And it's just this movement on the rock where that hold feels great. That foothold feels positive. Oh my God, this feels really good. I'm going to do it. This is brilliant. And I'm
Uh-huh.
just focusing in that present moment on how strong I
Mm,
feel right
mm,
now.
mm, mm.
And a lot, even like that, I say there, oh my God, I'm going to do it. There are moments where I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then I fall off. And I
Yes.
notice that I'm actually not in the present moment. I'm just thinking about finishing. So I have to pull myself back in and just focus on one move at a time. So there's all
Mm.
these really kind of nuanced levels to bouldering that are absolutely applicable. And this was the beauty of it when I first started creating the course. I was like, I teach this in the
Uh-huh.
clinical
Yes.
practice.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is stuff that I'm teaching people on a daily basis.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And it was like, that was when I realized it kind of had legs,
Fantastic.
you know.
Fantastic. And makes me think as well on how beneficial could be for people. Definitely, definitely an invitation to everybody that is
Mm,
listening. And if you can do it, probably find it locally, or if you are in the area of Cumbria as well, they have the opportunity and the place to go to and try this. Because in the end, I'm thinking about, these activities that one can find
mm,
that will in the end give you another tool to
yeah,
work on your resilience
yeah,
in
yeah,
the long
yeah,
term, no?
yeah. I think as a culture, we're very much focused on doing
And achieving,
and
no?
achieving, that real kind of
Yes,
goal
yes,
focused, that
yes,
drive
yes.
kind of mentality, drive system kind of mentality. And that's great. But what I would also say is if you're going to do an activity, whether it's running, whether it's climbing, whether it's walking, is kind of bringing that embodied experience into it as well. So it creates
Uh-huh.
this other level, you know, whether it's walking or running. There's a really interesting uh, guy, I think he's in the Midlands, who
Mm-hmm.
combines running with psychotherapy.
Ah,
And he's a
interesting.
person-centered counselor. And he goes on, instead of a walk and talk, it's a run and talk, and it's that combining that aspect. Or can you combine the more mindful side of
Yes,
walking, of running?
yes.
How do I feel in this moment when I'm doing it?
Mm, mm, mm.
Is my mind all over the place, or am I focusing in this moment? Am
Yes.
I able to notice uh, kind of the beauty of things around me, that kind of gratitude kind of
Mm,
approach?
mm, mm,
We at
mm.
the university, particularly within the mental health team, we're keen on this idea of glimmers and this
Yes, the
idea of,
glimmers.
yeah, so
Yes, I've
looking
heard
at,
of it.
instead of
Yes.
just like looking at triggers and being aware of triggers, being aware of glimmers. you
Yes,
know
yes,
that idea
yes.
of, oh yeah, the colors on that tree are absolutely stunning, or
Absolutely.
I love the feel of the wind on my face right now, those real basic things, the smell that I can smell right now,
Yes. Yes.
or the laughter of somebody that I can hear 2 streets away, those real glimmers when we're doing these
Mm.
exercises. So it's
Yes.
combining, not just focusing on, yes, do feel better, it's the mechanisms of why I feel better. Actually, I feel
Exactly.
really grateful for being around people and climbing, or I
Hmm.
feel really grateful that I've got time off away from the
The
responsibilities
day
of
to
work,
day.
and
Mm.
I'm sat on the top of a boulder with a really good view. A lot of the time,
Yes.
it's not just the bouldering, it's the environment that I'm in,
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
taking time to not just focus on the doing, but the mechanisms of that doing. Does that make sense?
100%, because it's about the flavors of the experience,
Absolutely.
right? And
Yeah,
as you
yeah.
say, sometimes, and that's the thing in terms of self-awareness. I think
Mm,
one of the issues that I see, and we need to start to finish, but one of the issues that I see with self-awareness is that when first, how much self-awareness is enough
mm,
self-awareness, but also how much we are focusing on what's not working. No, that self-awareness to identify, as you
mm.
say, for example, triggers or how bad it feels when I'm feeling. But at the same time, I think this is taking us into the other angle
Absolutely.
where that self-awareness is not necessarily to bottle down or change or do
Mm,
something, to modify that feeling, but instead to understand, bring understanding. How do I get to
mm.
feel in this way? What do I do? How my body reacts when I'm feeling
Yeah.
in this way? What am I saying to myself when I'm feeling this way? To
Mm,
sort of bring a lot of understanding. And I
yeah.
think that is what really makes the difference. And also gives a space
Mm,
for the glimmers, for
absolutely.
for focusing and
Yeah.
identifying what are the things that actually make me feel good as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
No?
Yeah. And that kind of
Mm.
awareness is half the battle.
Yes,
Uh, I think,
absolutely.
that
Yes.
making space for just noticing
Yes.
how
Yes.
I feel with no
Mm.
judgment attached to it.
Exactly.
Okay, so like not necessarily like you say there, changing behaviors, but it's okay to feel this way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
And
that
more
doesn't
so,
mean anything,
exactly. The more so it doesn't, if I'm feeling anxious, for example, it doesn't mean that I have an anxiety
No,
disorder.
yeah,
Or if
yeah,
I'm feeling fearful, it doesn't mean like I am traumatized by this experience.
yeah, yeah.
And I think we have gone into some a little bit too far sometimes in
Mm,
pathologizing. So I think
absolutely.
these kind of activities also brings that
Yeah,
normalization, that
yeah.
getting more familiar with how you experience life,
Mm,
really.
yeah, yeah.
No?
And another key skill that we use in bouldering. Just because I
Uh-huh.
feel, especially when we start bouldering outside and landings aren't great, and we're having to have a couple of mats there, and it can feel really quite scary. But just because I'm anxious doesn't mean that I'm going to fall and hurt myself. Just because I'm
Uh-huh.
anxious doesn't mean I'm not going to do it.
Yes.
It's just a feeling, and it's just my brain trying to keep me safe. I
Yes.
can let go of that, and I can
Yes.
refocus on the problem at hand. And
Mm.
again, it's all these little skills that are
Yes.
absolutely transferable to everyday life.
Applicable to everyday life. Absolutely. So, so encouraging and fascinating as well. I'm really grateful for this conversation. Thank you so much. It's
No
fantastic.
worries.
Just for us to say that we want to invite everybody that has been listening to our conversation and that you have found
Hmm.
something that is meaningful for you. Share this episode. Help us to
Yeah.
help other frontline workers that may also, if they don't go to bouldering, but at least we'll start to understand those
Mm.
mechanisms that we are explaining, no?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
to be in the present, how to
Mm.
start to become more and more familiar with our
Yeah,
feelings
yeah.
and the reactions that we have to our sensations, bodily sensations as well. So thank you so very much for today, Andy.
Been lovely.
And thank you everybody for listening. See you soon.